What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff. A lot going on. Some thoughts on Aaron Rodgers and the speedy recovery from the Achilles, and some big picture NFL stuff. We have a new rule regarding coaching. We also have some information about a potential Super Bowl across the pond, as well as one of the most suspicious fans we have ever seen in the history of the NFL wearing a Chargers jersey at the Monday Night Football game. We will dive into it all, but first, subscribe to the podcast wherever you may listen. Apple, Spotify, was just jamming out to Spotify. Go subscribe right now. If you're watching this on YouTube, hammer that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a comment below, interact with our content. And you know thevolume.com has you covered on merch. Thevolume.com, go check out the merch. Before we dive into a lot football-wise, I wanted to start with one thing and one thing only. My friends at Gametime. Do you want to go? I'm telling you, if you live in Philly, your team's winning the World Series. Do you want to see your team in the World Series? If you live in the Dallas area, do you want to see Bruce Bochy? Because anytime he is managing your team, you got a chance. And you're 2 games up. Hell, you got the Astros coming. If you want to go to a game, download the Gametime app. It's the official ticketing app of this podcast. Search around any event you want to go to. Concert, you a Swiftie now? You want to go to a comedy show, get some laughs, put a smile on your face? Use the Gametime app, sign up for a pair of tickets, and use the promo code John. That's just my name, John. John, promo code John. Easy to use, $20 off. Cannot recommend them enough. They got you covered, everything. Promo code John, $20 off. Hammer that Gametime app. Let's start with the New York Jets. Jets. I guess I screwed that up, but you know what I meant. I think there's a lot going on. First and foremost, I saw a headline today. 26 million people watched them play the Eagles. And I got to be honest, I was glued to my seat. That was 3 hours Niners-Browns, 3 hours of that game, and then the Sunday night game. Good day of football. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that game popped on TV. And one thing about the Jets is I think they were proven right. You know, we knew immediately last year and I'm all for taking big swings. I'm all for making massive trades, but not every massive trade works. Not every big move you make in business is going to yield you a big ROI, but you have to be willing to take them. It's the only way for growth, right? It's the only way in football for success. You got to be aggressive. And when you don't have a quarterback and you have the opportunity to trade for Aaron Rodgers, no brainer. I mean, it's the easiest move you'll ever make. I've supported it even to this day. I completely understand why the Denver Broncos traded for Russell Wilson. You do that, every team does it. Never forget, the Eagles wanted him. He would not waive his no-trade clause. The Eagles could have easily had Russell Wilson right now. They could find themselves in the debacle. They got lucky because he said, no, I'm not going to play there. And one thing's pretty clear. They're 3-3 with Zach Wilson playing the overwhelming majority of their season. And they got a chance to be a playoff team. And the Aaron Rodgers buzz about him coming back from the surgery, clearly, I watched some of Robert Saleh's press conference, and I've said this over and over. When you're going to go through tough times, I think the personality of young people in 2023, it's easier to be surrounded by a more positive person. Now, I'm not saying being real, some negativity and getting screamed at every once in a while in football isn't healthy, but like it's easier to be around the Robert Saleh types. I've seen it with D'Amico for a couple of years, whether they sustain this or whether they kind of hit the skids and end up winning 5 games. D'Amico's going to be positive. He's going to be an uplifter. It's the opposite, as you see with Bill Belichick. A lot of negativity in that building. I'll promise you. See it with Brian Daboll on the sideline. He is running hot. And I think this Jets team, I was wrong. And one of my early takes in the season is when you go into the year with Zach Wilson as your backup quarterback, that's on you. Because when you acquire a 39-year-old quarterback who at any moment could get hurt, that's just the nature of the sport, especially at that age, your backup quarterback matters. And this was a guy that you wanted to get rid of, but you held on to because you hoped that this guy could influence him. And ironically, he kind of did, but then the moment he gets hurt, he goes to LA. And as Robert Saleh said, like part of being on injury reserve, there is a separation. We want him here. We would take him here every day of the week, but his rehab's there. and the doctor that he uses there. But as you saw last week, having him on the sideline, there's kind of a belief in this team that they didn't quite have last year. Now, relative to the division, to me, the Bills are still the favorite, even with some of their question marks on defense based on injuries. And Miami, listen, if Tua plays 17 games, they're going to win 12 easily with that offense. I mean, they're averaging 8 yards a play. But the Jets have a chance to be the third team and make a wild card, especially we'll see, the Chargers could lose any game they play. Obviously, the injuries in the AFC North when it comes to, can Pittsburgh even score? The Browns, their quarterback situation, we'll see. I don't care how good their defense is, and it's freaking awesome. The Ravens have a million injuries, but they got Lamar Jackson. And obviously the Bengals are still working some things out. But it's pretty wide open in the AFC, especially if the Chargers are out. They're the AFC West and the AFC South are only getting one team. So definitely going to be multiple teams from the East and the North. And I think the Jets have at least kept their playoff hopes alive. And that's all you could ask for after the dude's laying there on the ground. And listen, I find them an easy watch. The defense is fun. It's a lot more fun than last year. I'll promise you that. And I saw another story that kind of went viral when it comes to the Jets. There's a big difference in the quote unquote media between the people that write and then the people that talk / are on TV. There is a journalistic element to sports writers, right? If you write for a newspaper, if forever you wrote for a big conglomerate online, there's a journalistic element to your craft, right? When it comes to the audio medium, whether it's radio, now podcast, it's all about two things: entertainment and money. And you could argue, you could put them in any order you want. I personally value 1A, 1B, the listener / the consumer first, and then 1B, the revenue, but it kind of goes hand in hand. And Pat McAfee said that he was paying Rodgers, and he's paid him well over $1 million. And Rodgers obviously is one of the biggest guests in the history of audio, at least in my life, in terms of what he means to the impact of an individual show. And a lot of guests, like historically a coach, forever WFAN would get the Yankees manager. And I always heard they paid him like $500,000, and their rating share was huge. When I worked in radio, we used to pay players on the Giants, on the Raiders, and on the 49ers to come on the station. Now, some of them would be $100 a hit. Some of them would be $500 a hit. But it wasn't guaranteed success. Just because you'd have on Maurice Jones-Drew or Brandon Belt from the Giants didn't mean your ratings went up. But if you got the right guy and you got a good rapport, it was must listen, and it usually resonated. Like Aaron Rodgers, which one is just a smart guy. He's good on the medium because he can really talk. Then he has a friendship with Pat, so it's kind of a fun listen. And then you factor in all the controversy and his willingness to kind of talk some shit. So when I saw this story, and a lot of the bloggers / writers, and really a lot of writers are essentially bloggers, internet writers now, I think we're kind of taken back. In this business, we pay to play. I would gladly cut. I couldn't pay someone $1 million, but I could pay someone $100,000 if I knew I would get the equivalent of what McAfee got to this show, whether it was a coach or whether it was a player. I wouldn't even hesitate because it's well worth it. If you're going to break news, if you're willing to say shit, part of what makes Rodgers the ultimate guest is, one, he will break news. When news is broken about him, that place is the first place he talks. And last but not least, he's willing to talk a lot of shit. He is very, very entertaining. Most of these coaches, like if I had on Sean McVay or Dan Campbell or Kyle Shanahan, Mike Vrabel, just think of the young coaches on a weekly basis, there is no chance during the season they talk a lot of shit about their opponents or other players or other coaches. It's not worth it for them to do it. It would actually turn out, even if they were fun and it was fun-natured, it wouldn't be as crazy as what Rodgers is bringing. Rodgers is the ultimate guest. And when McAfee said that he'd gladly cut him the check, of course he would. That's this business. In television and definitely in audio, you pay to play. And when you get the right guests, it's a game changer. It's worth every freaking penny. Forever when Steve Young went on KNBR in the Bay Area during the 49er season, the needle was moved. No different than when Kyle Shanahan goes on, or back in the day when Bruce Bochy goes on. Whoever's listening to this, whatever market you're in, Roethlisberger did it forever. Tom Brady did it forever. They were paid to come on. That's the way this business works. This isn't about journalism. It's about entertainment and about revenue. So, of course, a writer wrote about it kind of being taken back that McAfee's paying to play. Of course he is. That's why he's successful. And he would gladly do it more for 10 more versions of Aaron Rodgers. It's very hard to find. He's paying Nick Saban to come on his show. I wouldn't take time out of my day to watch that because Nick's not really going to say much. He's just not. But Aaron Rodgers will. And for example, I watched today the 20 minutes Aaron Rodgers was there with him and AJ. Why? It's very entertaining. It's very good. When I was young, Dan Patrick used to have on Charles Barkley and Reggie Miller, and the interviews were just incredible. Even younger, Jim Rome used to have on consistent guests like Mark Grace. And I don't even think at the time he was even paying them, but it was incredible radio. Part of when you're listening, and you know this with a guest, it's why I don't have on that many guests. I know some people in the NFL, right? But they're not going to say anything. It's going to be pretty generic. You see a lot of interviews that they do around the league, and it's like, whatever. You come for me, I'll try to entertain, right? Now, if I knew they would be good, I would gladly pay them, right? I wouldn't even hesitate. And I was just shocked to see how some people, and listen, a lot of you guys listening don't know how it works, but most radio stations in their major markets, like if you have the Cubs and the Bears, you are paying for their head coach, their manager, and their players to come on if it's a weekly basis. Now, if it's a one-off, probably not. They'll just come on. But weekly guests are compensated for their time. We're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw 5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action. So download the app now and sign up with the code JOHN, J-O-H-N. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the NFL. With code JOHN, J-O-H-N. The crown is yours. Another thing, I saw Sports Business Journal broke some news today, and there were a couple things. Let's start with this. The coaching interviews in the NFL is something that's been long controversial, right? When you can interview coaches and a lot of guys that are still in the playoffs. But a lot of the teams interviewing the coaches are done with their season, and they don't want to wait till the playoffs end or the Super Bowl ends. And it's tough. And I've always leaned to, listen, whether you're listening to this and you're really ambitious, whether you work with really ambitious people, it will not matter what any rule is when you're allowed to interview, when you're allowed to leave a job, when your non-compete ends. Ambitious people, go-getters, and people that want more out of their profession will always push the envelope. So even when you have rules, you're not allowed to interview, because a huge part of this is, if I'm getting ready for a wild card game or I'm getting ready for a divisional game, and I think this is a very fair question to ask, how can you put in enough time if we're playing the Eagles or we're playing the Bills and you're also interviewing for 3 head coaching jobs? Well, it's just, he would be thinking about it no matter what. So whether he's interviewing or whether he's not, he still would be dedicating some time to contacting people. Part of this is why you have an agent. Now, I think you should either make a universal rule, nobody can interview till the week after the championship game and that gap for the 2-week gap for the Super Bowl, or there are no rules. I find some of these arbitrary. Like, no one can do an in-person interview till after the divisional round. So what about the coordinators that are in the championship games? Like, they are allowed to do it too, but also they got a game to prepare for. So I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. Clearly, teams get mad. They're paying these coaches a ton of money, and the head coach gets mad. But listen, it's business. Like the head coach is allowed to get mad. You're making $12 million, and the guy that's making $1 million who has the opportunity to get a $9 million job, you're getting mad at him for thinking about that. You would too. And you were once in that position. So it's a very delicate situation. I understand the arguments on both sides, but you never slow down ambition. You never slow down the guy who is dead set on trying to become a head coach. You never slow down the guy that's dead set on being the highest grossing sales guy. You never slow down the guy that wants to be at the top of the org chart. They are just driven and wired like that. And whether you make a date, you push it back a week, or you move it up 3 weeks, it's not going to change that guy's wiring. And I think coaching, one, it's a nomadic profession. So these guys are used to getting hired and fired. And in a weird way, they're kind of numb to it all, at least after a while. I mean, go to some of your favorite teams and look at like your wide receiver coach or your O-line coach or your special teams coach, especially if they are like 60 years old. They have moved, I mean, potentially like 20, 18, 19 times. It's the reason I got out of the profession. I'm like, I'm a West Coast guy. I don't want to keep moving around. I don't want to go move to Arkansas and scout the Southwest for somebody. That does not interest me. I left Philly, moved back to the West Coast, and I just saw so many people in this industry that were constantly moving around. And listen, some people are numb to it. And I'm not afraid to move. Hell, I just did it. But I remember at the time, like, I can't see myself moving 5 different times and working for 3 different teams. That's not something that got my juices flowing. But for a lot of people, and I saw it firsthand, it did. Guys liked it. And I think when you see this kind of pushback of the interview process, I don't think it changes that much. People are always going to, you saw last year with Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals having to give a pick. Like, he wanted to be a head coach. I don't blame him. I just saw in Paradise Valley, dude bought a $10 million house. Guess what? He ain't buying a $10 million house if he's a coordinator. Howie Roseman would want that. Sirianni would want that. Jeffrey Lurie would want that. It's part of life. So I think this is a story making a lot of headlines. I really don't think it's going to change that much besides logistically. You still can do the Zoom interviews, right? So if I'm doing a Zoom interview, how many people listening to this right now do Zoom talks with people, whether through your job, whether interviewing people, whether it's sales calls? What the hell's the difference, right? Obviously, there is a difference being in person with someone, but if put yourself in a situation where, let's just pick a number, you make $100,000 and you are going to interview with someone for $1 million. Obviously, if it's an in-person interview, you would take that shit very seriously. But would you take it that much less seriously if it was the same? You make $100,000, you're going to get interviewing for $1 million job, and it's over Zoom. Because I know for myself, I would take that very seriously. I'd be pretty freaking dialed. So this notion, if I can still talk to you online, even if I don't even know all the rules, let's just say they can only talk to you for 2 hours. I'm still taking those 2 hours very seriously. And if I'm a coach preparing for a playoff game, I'm still finding time to study that team's roster, to study that team's owner and their general manager, to study some of that team's game tape. I am. Whether I have to stay up a couple hours, which might limit some of my energy the following day. Welcome to life. I mean, there's a lot of money on the line. Anytime there's a lot of money on the line, I don't care what you do for a living, sell stocks, construction worker, run hospitals, envelopes are going to be pushed. So I don't necessarily think this is going to slow down much when it comes to kind of, coaches being all in. And listen, once you get to professional football, it's somewhat, people laugh at it like it's all about the team. Well, kind of. You're leaking about your contract as a coordinator that you're getting interviewed for this job and you're also getting interviewed for this job. So you're no different than a player. Like, everyone's somewhat out for themselves. And it's a fine line of a balance, right? Because even in the pros, everyone is worried about their own business, right? As a player, my contract isn't really tied to like 5 other players. It's just myself, or myself as a coach is kind of tied to other coaches. But as an individual, if my team's doing shitty, but my offense is doing well, I can still have success. So it's just a fine line. And now with the amount of money that's on the line, obviously for players, but when you look at these coaching salaries, like I said, Jonathan Gannon, and maybe he's independently wealthy, bought a $10 million house in Paradise Valley. And this is not some Big J being resentful. I'm all for it. Go get it, man. I celebrate success on this show. But the reason he's able to do that is because his ambition wanting to be a head coach. And so I think the NFL is going to keep trying to tweak it. I just ultimately don't know if it changes that much. And then the other thing is there has been some talk about doing an international Super Bowl. I don't think it's likely. I think it's a lock. I wouldn't be shocked to see multiple spots internationally to host Super Bowls, right? Because ultimately the NFL, I saw it this year. I've been to 2 Super Bowl venues when I lived in the Bay Area, San Francisco. That would have been 17 when it would have been January, February 17, the Broncos, Carolina. And then this year when it came to Arizona. A huge part of it is just all this shit going on around the city, right? But the league makes all their money on the game based on you watching it on television, right? 100 million people, whatever the number is. That is the key. It's the whole key to all these sports. How many people sit on their couch and watch TV? It's the reason Adam Silver right now is making a big deal about player participation. He didn't give a shit previously. He might have, but he definitely wasn't going to make it public, and he wasn't going to make it a big deal. Now they're writing up rules, doing fines. Why? Because in a year, they have to negotiate their media rights deal. And who's paying big freight for the NBA if I don't know the players are going to play? It's all about television. The television is where you pay the bills. So if I put the Super Bowl, let's just hypothetically say in London, and I'll just pick 2 random teams. The Bills play the Rams. The league doesn't really care if a lot of the fans are able, or Seattle or whoever, are able to make it over to London, whether you got a passport or whether you can afford to go. They don't give a shit. As long as you sit there on that Sunday when the Super Bowl is played and watch and help account for the 100 million people. And clearly, the NFL is pretty bloodthirsty right now. It's been pretty, all over the internet. I truly believe this. I'm not just saying it to try to be funny. That was a fake fan on Sunday or Monday night. I believe that was a fake fan. I don't believe that was a real fan. Now, is my conspiracy theory, why would they pay a fan? Is there some sort of seeing Taylor Swift and the female demo and the excitement? I don't know. I honestly don't even care why they would do it. I'm looking forward to The Athletic breaking it down, doing some Big J work and getting us the information. But I don't believe that was a real fan. And I do think the NFL will do anything when it comes to money. And going to London, going to Germany in a couple weeks is all about expanding the audience and finding more people to watch. Because what is eventually going to happen, right? All these games aren't just going to be on Fox and CBS. I'm 39 years old. When I'm 60 years old, do you think I'm just going to walk to my flat screen TV and turn on Fox and CBS and see the NFL? Or more than likely, it's going to be on Apple TV or Netflix or whoever, right? Probably. Well, what does that mean? Well, if I'm in Germany or I'm in London, it's just as easy for me to consume it as it is for John Middlekauff in Scottsdale, or you, Billy, in Minnesota, or James in Tampa. It's all the same. So the time differences might be different, but in terms of it's all on my TV. Anyone ever travel internationally? I remember going to Europe for a month when I was in college and wanting to watch like baseball games or, the majors in golf, and you just can't find it on TV, or it's very, very difficult to find on TV. Well, when it comes to streaming, it ain't difficult. I can find whatever I want, whether I'm in China or whether I'm in Florida. Now, obviously, China might have some restrictions, but you know what I mean? I could be anywhere around the world and watch the same thing on Netflix or Apple TV or Amazon Prime as you sitting in the middle of America. The NFL knows this. So to me, this international play isn't even just a short-term play. It's a big picture play, because how are they going to get that much bigger in America? They're having 26 million people watch Jets Eagles, which is fucking massive in 2023. But the only that number in America is never going to 44 million people. Maybe on a good year it goes to 30, maybe on a down year it goes to 22, but it's kind of in the realm of where it's going to be. But how do you get more people around the world to watch? You go there. And that's why they've been going to Mexico, going to London, going to Germany, and really more consistently. Like when I was a kid, I remember the 49ers, I think, played in played in Japan or Tokyo against the Falcons, if memory serves me correct. It felt like a little more random back then. Now it feels more consistent. They know they're on to something, and I think full pedal ahead. And I would expect 100% next decade international Super Bowl. I would expect the next time they announce Super Bowls, I think it's definitely on the table. For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix and NFL Plus for just $25 a month with Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings. Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions you already love, like Netflix and NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, and more. Just go to Verizon.com/plusplay to bundle and save on Netflix and NFL Plus today for a limited time only. A couple news and notes. Julio Jones signs with the Eagles. They got a little injury, signed Julio. Crazy. Julio's 34. He feels like he's 48. So, yeah, 7-time Pro Bowler, practice squad, chance to move up. Obviously had an injury to the third wide receiver. At least it would look pretty cool if you just rolled out. I don't know, Julio has been a shell of himself for years. But if you're just playing video games, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen, DeAndre Swift, Goddard. On paper, in theory, it sounds pretty cool. This Thursday night game, I'm pretty excited for this Thursday night game. I really am. I've watched a ton of the Saints. As I said the other day, Derek Carr just hasn't played well. He simply just has not played well. Not for the money they're paying him. I think this is going to be the first time that 10+ million people are all watching him play. He has been a very polarizing player for the last half decade with the Raiders. Everyone kind of flown under the radar a little bit with the Saints. You don't fly under the radar when you play one of these primetime games, even if it is the streaming game. And Trevor Lawrence, who got banged up at the end of the game, full disclosure here, have not watched much Jags football. Have not. Mainly, I guess they played in a couple London games. You know, for me, it starts really early. I typically have watched football so late. The Sunday morning game, especially the Jags, I didn't watch the Jags Bills. I didn't watch really last week Jags Colts. They were killing them. I changed the channel or changed the 4-box to another game. Am interested to watch. I said when the season started, I thought they could be really good. I thought they had a chance to be one of the best offenses in the league. Now, they got to keep him healthy. But Calvin Ridley, ETN, had the big game a couple weeks ago against the Bills, with Doug. This is a tough game for Carr. I'm fascinated on this one. I really am. And yeah. And last but not least, I wanted to hit on something. A little segment we call It's Time for the Week's Player/Coach. I thought might give almost anything to redo his game, brought to you by Uber Eats. Love my friends at Uber Eats. Use them all the time. This one's a no-brainer for me. Because Dan Lanning, I like Dan Lanning. I'm impressed. I would take Dan Lanning over Mario Cristobal every day of the week. Dan Lanning is an upgrade. Mario was solid for Oregon. Mario got Oregon kind of their swag back, was recruiting big time. A little limited as a coach, but had the program headed in the right direction, but he clearly had a ceiling. Dan Lanning was a bold choice, but it's working out. Team's really talented. He's a fiery guy. He's clearly a smart guy. But like Brandon Staley, he constantly goes for it. And I'll say this every single day that I ever talk about football. I'm all for going for it. But there is a time and a place. And sometimes when you're playing in some of these big games, especially when your defense is playing well, it's okay to punt. And they had a chance against Washington to punt and make him go 85, 90 yards. And they refused. And then Penix had to go half the field. The other thing, when you don't punt at midfield and you go for it and you don't get it, you not only give them great field position, you invigorate and light up their sideline. You give the people on their team hope. And let's face it, what's the most powerful thing in the world? Hope and energy. And that's immediately what Washington got. They drove down the field in a couple plays, and Oregon lost. And I saw his explanation, and he's smart. He's a good speaker. It's eloquent. He explained it well. I'm sorry. This is back-to-back years. I had a buddy who works in the league as a college director, was at the game. He said he did the same shit last year when they lost. Back-to-back years he lost to Washington. for being, in my opinion, over aggressive. So that was this week's almost coach of the week. And you can order almost anything with Uber Eats, the official on-demand partner of the NFL. Order now